Outlining challenges aren't just for beginners. No, 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 no. They are common even for seasoned writers like myself and you, the people of the people. Now, have you ever had an outline where you're like, hey, Thomas, this 27-point plot point outline is not working. Something feels off. What's going on? What did I do? Did I fail? Do I not know what I'm doing? Well, these outlining fails can happen to anyone. And it can also stifle your creativity, being that you're like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to give up. I'm going to start over. I don't even want to touch this. Well, more importantly, this video is going to explore the 5 common outlining mistakes and how to avoid them. So sit right back and hear a tale. All right. So outlining is absolutely something that I advocate for. However, even if you're a pantser, there's still a loose outline that you follow, right? You have to set up the ordinary world. You do need an inciting incident. You're working towards a midpoint conflict. There has to be a resolution at some point. The only thing that's different is pantsers are discovering their works, but they are still working with a generalized outline. They're saying to themselves, hey, I need to hit these beats. So depending on how detailed or how loose your outline is, outlining in general is a great guide to discovering the narrative at hand. And I'm an advocate for that. I believe outlining is important, but you should also work on discovering what becomes of your narrative through the whole thing. And even though I am a deep outliner, I do believe that over detailing or create rigid plans without some movability, malleability, or ignoring, more importantly, character development within the outline, things like that will stifle the process. For some writers, outlining can feel restrictive, right? It could because you start resembling a rigid framework. Sometimes you look at it and you go, what's going on? There's these things that hit us as writers. So today, we're going to focus on the 5 common outlining mistakes and how to basically avoid them, in the sense of like, if you are a hardened outliner like myself or a pantser, when you're approaching your guidelines, here's some things that you may have ran into, or whatever the case may be, right? So, 5 common outlining fails. Boosh. Overly rigid structure, everybody. So an outline that's too rigid can restrict creativity, leaving little room for new ideas or unexpected story developments. This can make the writing process feel like filling in blanks rather than discovering the story. A flexible, malleable outline, on the other hand, allows you to adapt as new ideas come up, making the story feel more organic. What am I basically saying? I'm saying if you're going with the overly rigid structure, there is a major difference between Thomas meets Christine. Then there's, Thomas meets Christine at the deli. Thomas makes a fool of himself while meeting Christine at the deli. These are general statements, right? That are really strong outlining. I'm sure if you've watched my live outlining in real time videos, I like to generalize. When I get to the specifics, I leave that to the writing part. Like what is the name of the deli? What kind of deli? The atmosphere of the deli. All that I leave for the discovery. All that is all part of the story element of my narrative. The plot is Thomas makes a fool of himself meeting Christine at the deli. That is important. That's the meet cute. I need that. Great. That leaves some flexibility, because how do they meet? How does he meet foolishly? What is foolishly? What does that look like? I don't have to worry about the little details for that, the specific details. Foolishly gives me enough, And then I don't need to say how he enters the deli, who's there first. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You can, but when it comes to outlining, when I say I'm a deep outliner, it means that I have a process where I start off very general. Thomas meets Christine. Then I go into All right, now I gotta expand on that, right? I do an expanded outline where I go, Thomas meets Christina at a deli, and then I'm like, yeah, but how does he? All right, Thomas foolishly makes a fool of himself, meeting Christine at the deli. Then when I get to the chapter outlines, that's when I take that, and now I continue to create broad statements, but I take that and I work through it. Thomas talking on his phone, walks through the deli front door, tripping, tossing his phone across the room, and it lands on the table, pushing Christine's salad on the floor. All right, well, that's pretty crazy, but now we got something, right? But I still have room to play with that. What is how Christina's sitting at the table, how she's eating. Is she eating? Is she finished basically with her salad? Did she just sit down? Right? I still have room for this. What is he wearing? I don't need to know that in the outline. I don't need to know that in the expanded outline, and I don't need to know that in the chapter outline. What I do need to know, though, while I'm working out my outlines, is why he's there, why she's there, but allow it to be broad. Allow it to have malleability and movability. Ignoring character motivations, I kind of slipped into that a little bit. When an outline focuses solely on plot points without considering why characters act, the story risks feeling forced and unconvincing. Characters need personal reasons for their actions to make them relatable and believable. Outlining character motivations alongside plot events helps ensure that each action aligns with the development and personality. If you've watched my videos on outlining, you know that I create character motivations and positions and their motivations all through the movement of the outline. So uh, when I expand on that, Thomas meets Christine. Thomas meets Christine at a deli. Thomas makes a fool of himself meeting Christine at the deli. Right. That's when I get into the chapters. That's when I'm going to start really exploring the positions and motivations. But if you've seen my outlining process, just writing down what they're doing helps me lean into that. And then I just expand on their motivations and their positions. And the reason I do that more fluidly is because I want their positions to unfold, or I want to discover them naturally through the outlining process. I don't want to say this person likes apples and this person hates apples. I don't want to do that. I don't want to say that he's there to get lunch, because that is a motivation, right? But uh I like to think of cause and effect, because if meeting Christine at the deli, all right, well, how did he get there? Is there a scene before that? Am I starting the book off that way? All these things are very important elements. Sometimes we don't really need to know all the little details, but when it comes to character motivations, allow yourself to discover it through the outlining process and then the discovery process on top of that. Remember, broad and general statements are great when it comes to outlining, as long as it makes clear sense. Additionally, uh, while I'm working out their dialogue, I'll start finding their personalities and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily write in my outline, Thomas has a funny personality, or she loves puns, or she grew up being a very she had a comedy career her first 5 years of her 20s, and now she's in her early 30s, and she has a different life, so she's quick-witted, and she has a right, like I might write some of those things as ideas, but I don't stick by them. When I worked on the epic fantasy that I have, I like to brainstorm ideas. I like to throw out ideas. I like to be like, all right, he's this, and this, or she's this, and this, or blah, 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 right? They have this. But where I really find the characters is when I start exploring their plot, their narrative plot throughout the outline, and then how they interact and react within the narrative itself, the chapters and things like that. And you start realizing, oh, okay, this works, this works, this works. But trauma is a big thing in the epic fantasy for one of the characters, actually a few characters. Things affect people, right? So I always knew I wanted to tackle trauma in the story, right? Because that's something I deal with. So when I approached it, I knew I wanted them to have trauma, and I knew what I wanted the cause of the trauma to be, and then I knew I wanted them to deal with the trauma. So in the outline, I didn't necessarily say he dealt with the trauma. Uh, I figured out what would narratively be interesting, and then I turned that into the scene or the beat or the moment, and then I built from there. So when it comes to ignoring character motivation, sometimes we forget that, right? How does the dream, how does the nightmare, how does the incident, how does the trigger affect the character? And what is their motivations to deal? Well, hypothetically speaking, sometimes people are like, I want to heal myself from this. I want to be able to deal with this. So their motivation is to fix this. So you have to try to create a cause and effect. If they're trying to heal from their trauma, how do they do that? Well, maybe they work out a lot. Maybe they become aggressive. Maybe they become isolated. Maybe they, right, because they're reacting to the feelings, and that their motivation is now to avoid the feeling, or maybe it's to approach. So you have to think of those things, but you don't necessarily have to get extremely specific with everything. 3, lack of conflict and stakes. One of the big things I notice as a developmental editor when I'm working with client stuff is sometimes there's just no conflict or stakes. It's as if the writer is afraid to put their characters into situations, or to have them argue, or have them disagree, or have them be in a situation where they have to make choices, where it's just like, let's just get to the next moment. I know we need this moment, but I want to get to the cool stuff. And without adequate conflict or stakes, an outline can lead to a story that feels flat and lacks tension. I say story because it doesn't unfold through the emotional experiences of the characters making choices. It's just things are happening, but nothing is necessarily happening. So you want to challenge. Challenges and obstacles are what keep readers basically engaged. They become invested in characters' journeys, and it builds and building in these moments of conflict, ensure that protagonists face meaningful struggles. And that also adds depth to the story. It creates dimension to the characters because their choices against those challenges, how those challenges influence them and mold them into who they are. So keep that in mind. When you're dealing with an outline, a scene, every scene needs a beginning, a middle, and end. That middle is basically a midpoint conflict, but outside of that midpoint conflict, you have characters, and those characters all have stuff going on. And you have to think to yourself, am I going to advance arcs here? Am I going to add to arcs? Am I going to challenge arcs? Are they going to resolve an arc? Whatever the case may be. Even a resolution has a conflict to resolution. You have to create tension. You got to create stakes. A battle isn't interesting because it's fighting. A battle is interesting because what is at stake? What if they lose this fight, other than I'll die, what is truly at stake? If they, what about conflict of internal, external, emotional, spiritual, friendly conflict, disagreements? In your outline, it's important to recognize that in your scenes. So just in the first example where I use where Thomas makes a fool out of himself meeting Christine at the deli, that's conflict and tension. What's at stake? Well, he's going to be embarrassed. He knocked her salad off the floor by the phone flying out of his hands because he tripped on something, and it knocked her salad all over the floor. So bad impression. So how do you fix that? They have a meet cute, which is good. Not that their motivations were to meet, but in that situation, now he has to kind of he's embarrassed by it, right? Or he could be like, "Oh, my bad. I will buy you another salad." No, no, no. I'm okay. I just finished my salad. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I owe you a salad. So if I'll see you here next time. Right. But you have to create something going on. All right. This is we've basically kind of touched on this through the entire video so far. Overloading with details. An overly detailed outline can overwhelm the creative process, making it feel more like a chore than a guide. When too much is planned out, there's little room left for spontaneity or inspiration. So you want to keep the outline broad, with key points allowing you to maintain structure while leaving space for creative exploration. Another thing you could do, like Brandon Sanderson's known for this, would be like, oh, introduce this world building element. We have to learn about this aspect of magic, or we have to, these characters, I have to define this character's motivation. So, whatever the case may be. I have to introduce this person. These people have to meet. Like, those are broad examples that make strong outlining, because then you get to play with that moment. Thomas drinks his diet cherry Pepsi. It's a broad statement, but now you get to play with that. You get to have an intro, a middle, and an end. So each beat, that's the other thing. So a narrative has an act 1, act 2, act 3. You could have 4 acts, 6 acts, 9 acts. But just for a quick example, you have act 1, act 2, act 3, right? Then the chapter should have an act 1, act 2, act 3. It should have an arc. It should have a beginning, middle, and end. But then scenes within that chapter should have a beginning, and a middle, and end. And so should beats. Beats have a beginning, a middle, and end. You could break it down further and further and further. Character arcs have a beginning, a middle, and end, right? And you could break those up, and you just create these waves. Some waves go up really high, and then they come down and go really low, and then they come up a little bit, right? It's based on the velocity of it, the intensity of it. Some scenes have little tiny waves, some moments have big waves, right? Like life nodes, right? Story nodes might have a big wave, and then it might go down even deeper if they failed. So you got to think of a rhythm, and overloading your outline with too much detail takes away that rhythm, because you're telling your brain, hey, it's this or the highway. In reality, it's not. It's okay to sort of allow moments to be played in. So if you generalize things, then you could play in those moments. All right, number 5, undeveloped subplots. Oh yeah. Neglecting subplots can result in an outline that feels one-dimensional, as secondary storylines are essential for adding depth and variety. Variety being the key word. Without them, the main plot might begin to seem repetitive or lacking complexity. Not that every story has to be extremely complex, but some need a little bit of complexity, right? And outlining subplots alongside the main narrative helps create a richer, more immersive story. So again, if you've seen my outlining videos, the live ones I do in real time, basically I'll do the main plot first. I'll outline every one of the 27 plot points, get a beat for the main plot. The main plot will always be in every single beat of that outline. Now, when it comes to subplots, I don't do every single. I could. Some subplots are big, but that doesn't mean they all are. So sometimes I'll just cut it up, and maybe there's a subplot that only gets a mention once in the act 1, once in act 2, once in act 3. Maybe I do it twice. Twice in act 2, once in act twice in act 1, once in act 2, and then it's over, right? Because some subplots resolve fairly quickly. But the idea is, when you add subplots, right? Not only is it supposed to enhance the main plot in some way or another, or enhance the characters to influence the main plot, you want your subplots to sort of be an extension of interest, right? So if the main plot is to get to the store and buy Diet Cherry Pepsi, imagine the whole story was us talking about Diet Cherry Pepsi, what store we're going to go to buy Diet Cherry Pepsi, right? The only drink that we can drink is Diet Cherry Pepsi. Now that starts getting a little repetitive, right? But if I'm hanging out with a friend and I'm like, we're at a Diet Cherry Pepsi, you want to get to the store? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. We get in the car and they're like, oh man, we need gas. Bro, can I borrow some gas money? I actually just got laid off. And it's like, yeah, of course you could borrow some gas money. And then we're like, all right, let's get to the gas station. And while we're trying to get to the gas station, we run out of gas. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't have a gas gauge. It's been broke. And it's like, all right, no problem. We'll just call somebody and now we're creating some sort of, and all it is, the story's main plot is to get soda. But now we're creating some sort of, not only is there conflict and stakes and because I need the soda because if I don't drink it, this headache's gonna get worse, and I need the caffeine, and I just don't like coffee, right? But that subplot is now developing because we get to solve the friend's situation, and maybe by the end of the story, they get a job offer, or maybe whatever the case may be. Like you have to solve that situation. The car's an issue, so maybe they don't get a job, but maybe the friend who wants a soda is like, "Hey, my father has a car that he wants to get rid of. I'll talk to him to give it to you, and then you just when you start working again, you could pay him off or buy it." So you got to put some time into subplots. That's really what makes. I'm a big fan of character, and the subplots really fill up when it's through characters and their personal journeys and their sub journeys, and ultimately a story has flavor and texture when the subplots add real value to the main plot that make it a little more interesting. Okay, take away. When you identify a section of your outline that feels rigid or lacking, this is an opportunity to do what? Brainstorm. That's right. Alternative directions. Remember, what you write doesn't necessarily mean that has to happen. You're allowed to, as the writer, change anything and everything. Nothing is beholden to the narrative but your choices. So if something doesn't work, it's okay to change it. If something needs work, it's okay to change it. If you need to brainstorm on something because you don't know where to go with it, maybe just take it out. You're in control. Um, so you always, again, you the real takeaway here is if it's getting rigid or it's getting boring or it's lacking depth, do some brainstorming. Think about how you could add some subplots to it, how you can add some character motivations, how you can challenge the situations. If the plot feels too front and center, and you're like, well, I want it plot driven, but I know I'm not feeling any characters. Start working on the characters to bring the characters up a little bit. I personally like character driven stories. I also personally think all narratives are character driven because the characters should be making choices. If they're not, then it is plot driven, but there's no characters. So things are happening, but nothing is happening. So, I feel story is through character driven narrative. Why do I say that? Well, because I believe a narrative is made up of a narrative is made up of plot and story. Plot is what needs to happen no matter what. And story is how it unfolds through the emotional experience of characters and their choices. So if the characters aren't making choices, don't have agency, or they just feel like they're backseated to the plot, I don't really think it's a story. It's a plot. Things are happening, but nothing is happening because remember that statement, things are happening is plot. When I say nothing is happening, it means there's no story. There's no character agency, no character choices. And by the way, character choices does not mean uh, we got to get soda. All right, let's go get soda. Those aren't character choices because that's the plot. The plot is they ran out of soda. They need to go get soda. So they are not making choices. They're doing what's needed because the story needs them to go get, right? So they need soda. They're out of soda. They got to go get soda. That's plot. But how are they going to get there? Well, we could take my car or your car. Well, my car's broken. Well, I guess we could take your car. Yeah, I'm out of gas though. Now there's problems, and they have to make choices to solve those problems. That's where choices come in. That's where story comes in, right? How about forget it? Let's not take. I got 2 bikes. You want to ride bikes up there? Oh yeah, I love. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Hey, if you want, we could go through the paths. You want to go through the paths? And you're like, oh, is it? You think that's safe around here? Yeah, it's safe. I'll show you that we have like ramps and everything out there. There's like trails and stuff that we made. Those are choices because the plot dictates that we need to get soda. The choices are that instead of going with the car, they had cars, and then they decided to go with bikes. Now, why did they go with bikes? Well, because one car is not working, the other car needs gas. They don't have enough money for gas. but they do have the bikes. So now they're making choice. You know what I'm saying? They could have walked. They could have did anything, but they're making choices. But you could also challenge those choices. Now that they chose the bikes, they're going to go on the paths. They're going to do some. Maybe they do the jump and they land, and one of them gets hurt, or maybe the bike breaks. Maybe they get a flat tire. Whatever the case may be, is you keep challenging those choices to see how they react and keep the story going forward. More importantly, continuously increase the tension. Make sure stakes exist, and ensure conflict is a part of the program. Final thoughts. Outlining is a highly personal process, and there's no one size fits all approach. Finding the right method for your writing style and story takes time, experimentation, and patience. As you explore different outlining techniques, remember that what works for one writer may not exactly work for another. And that is absolutely okay. The key is to develop a process that feels natural, and then basically allows you to feel like you're empowered, that you're the one in control, and you're the one that complements the creativity instinctually or otherwise. But at the end of the day, remember, you are the writer, you make the choices. If a character is telling you in your head to do this thing, you have to say yay or nay. You have to be the one with the gavel. You have to make the choices. So, more importantly, it's a part of the process to recognize and take accountability when something isn't working. Just because you love something doesn't mean that it needs to be there, and just because you love something doesn't mean it doesn't need work. Some things we love still need work, including ourselves. I love myself, but I need a lot of work as a person. I mean, look at me. I'm old. As you write, new ideas will emerge during the process. Characters might surprise you, things might fall into place. The plot may end up needing adjustment or go in a direction that you didn't really foresee when you were just loosely outlining or broadly outlining. Your job is to create a balance between structure and spontaneity while allowing yourself to feel free enough to do the work. Writing is rewriting, which means all great writing is rewriting. And all great writers have great editors. That's it. That's it. Boom. Next video in this series. Outline examples from famous books. All right. Example. We're going to analyze the outlines of a popular book to show how successful authors plan their stories. That should be fun. Question. What's the biggest outlining challenge you face, and how did you overcome it? Please share your experience in the comments below. We love helping one another in this community. Like what you saw today, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and maybe thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. As always, truth and harmony. Yeah, that's what it sounds like when your brain goes. Anyway. Hey, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.